because it's interesting. We'll talk a bit today about measuring where you're at, and it's really interesting to see where we're at based on our feelings towards things. And remember, all of God's laws measure your feelings. So our session today is accepting my facade. Good session today. And to be frank with most of you, or pretty much all of you, this is where you're at. This is where you're at. And for many of you, you've been at this place for years, right? Still not really truly accepting the facade, and as a result, not moving forward in your progression. So it's really important we get this discussion today, what's really going on with our facade. So yesterday, we learnt in the evening about the creation of our facade and what's its purpose. So what I'd like to do to introduce this particular session is look firstly at the state of my facade. And before we look at the state in terms of the general condition of my facade, we really need to look at what the facade's purpose is. Does that make sense? So what are the two primary purposes of the facade? Let's look at one at a time. So Anna, if we come to Mike, you can't just look at me like that, Christina, you've got to use that mic.
To avoid pain.
To avoid pain, yeah. Should we call it a bit different than that? We'll call it desensitizing to pain. Right? Now, I use that word specifically because desensitization is an indication that you're probably not going to be able to avoid pain, but you can detune from it as much as you possibly can. So it's one of its primary purposes of the facade, to detune from the pain as much as you can get away with. Right? Now, of course, the only problem with that is that the more you desensitise to emotional pain, the more physical pains are actually created. So you end up accepting physical pain in preference to emotional pain. So you end up having to make some basic decisions with regard to physical pain versus emotional pain. And then, of course, with the physical pains, we go searching for medical solutions to them. So, you get, in a small way, you might use painkillers, Panadol, paracetamols, all those kind of painkillers to just dull the pain. So it makes it more, the physical pain now I'm talking about, it makes it easier to manage. But the physical pain is a symptom that indicates that you've been denying emotional pain for a long time. And the physical pain is just a symptom of that. Right? So that's one of the motivations of the facade, desensitise to pain. Very important to understand that. All right, what's the second motivation of facade? If we go Laura down, thanks.
So it helps us to feel like we're something better than what we really are.
Yeah, I think that's that's not one of the two primary motivations, okay. But it is a desire of the facade, certainly. Yeah. Right? But let's look at the two primary motivations. If we go right up the back to Ben.
To get our addictions met?
It is, but that again, there's a purpose to that, which is driving that. So we want to know what is the thing driving getting our addictions met. So if we come to Laureline on this side, thank you.
So that I can continue breaking God's laws?
That is the subsequent result. But many of you are not choosing to break God's laws purposely, you think. So that's not the main motivation. So Marie on this side, and then across to Nikki if Marie doesn't get it.
Avoid feeling my terror.
Yeah, that's the one. So to avoid OID, the emotion, OID, and I write down OID. Avoid the emotion of terror. That's the reason. That's our primary motivator. Remember this. This is the area of our global refusal to feel our terror about. So it's an emotion of terror that we're trying to not feel that drives all of what occurs above. So all the addictions are driven by that underlying motivation. Very important to understand that underlying motivation. These are the two primary motivations of your facade. We need to get that they are our primary motivations. And what happens as a result of the facade is all this other stuff. Denial right the way through, addictions, anger when we don't get our addictions and expectations met, and satisfaction or comfort, in quotations, when we do. All of that is all the result of these two motivations driven from the pain driving the facade. So the pain, remember we said yesterday, becomes the dominating controller of our life, right? So many of you have sort of seen the facade as the dominating controller, but that's just doing the job that the pain is demanding that it does. Or you could say the avoidance of the pain is demanding that it does. So avoiding pain causes you to demand that facade is engaged, and then, of course, everything that you do, your intellect, the way you use your intellect, every action you take is all just motivated to avoid the terror and avoid the pain. Right? Motivated by the pain, believing, or one of the false beliefs is that you can't feel the pain. You've got to desensitize yourself to the pain, terrified of the pain. That's the primary state of your facade. It's motivated by those two particular things.